Hello again. You're watching Today on eNCA DSTV channel 43 with me, Dan Moyane. Now, an alarming new report released by USAID paints a grim picture of South Africa when it comes to human and sex trafficking. Young girls in our country are said to be the most vulnerable. Released this week, it's been reported that South Africa accounts for most victims and perpetrators, and young females are the most trafficked. I'm joined now by Katie Modral, South Africa's country manager from the A21 campaign. Good afternoon, Katie. Welcome to Today. Always a tough subject, this of human trafficking, and in South Africa it's becoming a huge problem. We've spoken about this before, and seemingly it's getting worse. The numbers do not lie. Why is it such a headache for South Africa?
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm so glad you've asked that question. Why? Why is this crime thriving in our beautiful country? And I think if you read the report, it's there, all 121 pages of it. But in summary, I think there's two things that we can highlight. The vulnerability in South Africa is huge. We have a 54% vulnerability indicator that renders our South Africans just in the prime position to be lured into scenarios of trafficking, lured into trafficking rings, whether it's sex, or labor, or domestic servitude, or the other forms of exploitation. That's the first thing. The second thing that this report so beautifully highlights is the disparity or the difference between cases reported and what actually gets prosecuted. I just want to highlight some numbers for you down here. I think in the last 7 years, so from 2015 to 2022, there were at least 10,820 cases opened at SAP stations of trafficking. Now that's a 15-year or 7-year period. In a 15-year period, so from 2007 to 2022, we have only had 44 successful prosecutions. Close to 11K cases opened, 44 successful prosecutions. Basically, this crime is going unpunished, unsentenced, unchecked, and allowed to operate with relatively low risk within this country. And so I think if you look at that, if you unpack this report, it quite clearly explains why trafficking is thriving as an organized crime.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering why our country is such a fertile ground, for this, because the crime of human trafficking and sex trafficking interspecies with other types of very serious crimes like gender-based violence, prostitution, which in our country currently is regarded as a crime, organized crime, and then we have missing persons, and child abuse, as you've said. I mean, why is the country fertile ground for human trafficking?
I think there's many indicators that make something fertile or an incubator for a crime like human trafficking. And many of them are common to all types of organized crime. You mentioned human trafficking is usually interspersed or, connected to other crimes. So we see the sale of drugs. We see prostitution rings or sex trafficking rings that we see as well. We see forced labor or labor that there's high demand for labor within our various agricultural areas. So you've got that. There's demand for labor, there's demand for sex. But then you've also got this myriad of vulnerable people who are willing to maybe take a slightly riskier situation, and people who are willing to exploit that. They are willing to use somebody in the sex trade who might not be willing to be there. They are willing to underpay somebody for labor or pay them below the table and, not check out if they're actually there by choice or not.
Yeah, Katie, sorry to cut in there. From what you've just said, I'm thinking you've got labor trafficking, then you would have sex trafficking, but it all falls under human trafficking. Of these two as examples, labor and sex, which is the biggest?
Currently reported and prosecuted, the biggest is sex trafficking. But that does not mean that that's exactly what is happening on the ground. Labor trafficking goes largely unrecognized and unprosecuted. It's sometimes seen more as, rather than a criminal issue, a labor law issue. And I think that's where the issue comes in. But currently, sex trafficking is the most reported, recognized, and prosecuted within our country.
Yeah, the numbers don't lie. I say maybe there could be a lot of underreporting, as you say, but just to bring it home to our viewers, according to this report by USAID, between January 2018 and December 2021, 754 adult victims from more than 30 countries, those that have been reported. 445 of the 754 were from here, our country, South Africa. And wait for this, 59 of the reported 98 cases of children who were trafficked. 59 of them came from South Africa. Now, the numbers don't lie, but is there anything at all being done about it, Katie? I mean, what are we aware of? I mean, you've mentioned a number of challenges, but is there anything that at least is being done to stem the tide of human trafficking?
Definitely. And I think it is good to highlight what is being done, because it's what can be built on to actually tackle this crime. So firstly, we have an incredible piece of legislation. It is, I think, referred to in this research as a sword that really can stab into the heart of this organized crime. It's just the implementation of this legislation, the backing of it, the funding that goes into implementing this legislation. We have incredible legislation, firstly, and we have some really great monitoring bodies provincially. There are provincial task teams that they are headed by the eNCA and Department of Justice, with key role players from every province who are connected, and we work through cases together to ensure that, you know, cases that are reported are being investigated and are getting their way through the criminal justice system. You also have a myriad of very, very passionate NGOs who are doing awareness tirelessly on the ground. So there is a lot that is being done, but I think what's important to understand is, as everyday people, as community members, you and I, we can actually add to this fight. If we are seeing human trafficking around us, if we are seeing even something that looks suspicious, we can report it. Remember, human trafficking largely thrives because it's under-recognized and under-reported. So if you are seeing something suspicious, report it. You can call it into our hotline, 0800 222 777. The more reports that we get, the more we're actually able to force action to see this crime prosecuted, or policed and prosecuted in our country.
Please give that number again, a little bit slower this time.
I definitely can. It's the National Human Trafficking Hotline, 0800 222 777. You can also submit an anonymous web form. If you go to 0800 222 777.org.za, but the calls are taken 24/7, and you can call at any point for any assistance with human trafficking or reporting any tip-off.
And anonymity is guaranteed?
Guaranteed.
Thank you very much. Katie Modrao, South Africa Country Manager for the A21 campaign, a campaign that focuses on really looking into human trafficking in our country.